What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
The pipe was still warm in my hand when I first heard the screams. Sitting on my torn mattress in that abandoned building off Canal Street, I almost mistook them for the usual sounds of the city. New York's always screaming about something, right? But this was different. These weren't angry cab driver screams or drunk tourist screams. These were the kind that make your blood turn to ice. I took another hit, trying to convince myself it was just the crack playing tricks on my mind. The familiar rush hit me, but the screams didn't stop. They got closer, more desperate. "Shut the fuck up!" I yelled, stumbling to the window. That's when I saw Sarah, the homeless woman who usually camped in the alley below. She was running, actually running, which I'd never seen her do in the 3 years I'd known her. Behind her was... Jesus Christ. The thing chasing her used to be a businessman, I think. His suit was torn and bloody, but that wasn't the worst part. Half his face was missing, and he was moving like a puppet with cut strings, all jerky and wrong. Sarah tripped on a garbage bag. I wanted to help her, I really did, but the crack and the fear had me frozen in place. I watched as the thing fell on her. Her screams stopped too quickly. "Fuck, fuck, fuck," I muttered, backing away from the window. My pipe slipped from my trembling fingers, shattering on the floor. The sound echoed through my empty room like a gunshot. The thing in the suit looked up. Our eyes met. His were milky white, dead, but somehow still hungry. He started moving toward my building, leaving Sarah's body behind. I had about 5 minutes before he made it up here, assuming he could figure out the stairs. 5 minutes to decide, stay and hide, or run into whatever chaos was happening outside. The last of my crack was scattered among the broken glass at my feet. The decision was made for me when I heard more screams, this time from inside the building. Multiple sets of uneven footsteps started climbing the stairs. There was only one way out now, the fire escape. I grabbed my lighter, my knife, and the half-empty water bottle by my bed. As I climbed out the window, I could hear them in the hallway. The businessman wasn't alone anymore. The metal of the fire escape was cold under my bare feet. I hadn't worn shoes in days. 4 stories down, the alley looked clear except for Sarah's body. She wasn't moving anymore, but I knew she would be soon. I'd seen enough horror movies to know how this worked. I made it down 3 flights before my shaking hands slipped. The last 10 feet I fell, landing hard on my side. Pain shot through my ribs, but the crack dulled it enough for me to get up and run. As I staggered out of the alley, I realized this wasn't just my building. The streets of Chinatown were in chaos. Cars crashed into storefronts, people running and screaming. More of those things stumbling after them. I needed to find somewhere safe to ride out whatever this was. Somewhere to clear my head and figure out what to do next. But as sirens wailed in the distance and helicopters thundered overhead, one thought kept circling in my mind. For the first time in years, getting my next fix wasn't my biggest problem. The sun was just starting to rise over Manhattan, painting the sky a sickly orange. Hour 1 of whatever this was had just begun, and I was already running out of time. The withdrawal was already starting to hit. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and every shadow looked like it was moving. But I couldn't tell if that was from the crack wearing off or the fact that half of those shadows actually were moving. I'd been running for what felt like hours, though the sun had barely cleared the buildings. The streets of Chinatown had become a maze of death. Every time I thought I'd found a clear path, More of those things would appear, forcing me to double back or duck into buildings. That's how I ended up in Mr. Chen's convenience store. The old man had always kicked me out before, calling the cops if I lingered too long near his doorway. Now his store was empty, the front window shattered, and blood smeared across the lottery ticket display. "Mr. Chen," I called out softly, more out of habit than hope. Something crashed in the back room. "Who's there?" A woman's voice, young and terrified. I moved toward the storage room, stepping over broken glass and scattered cans. "Just looking for somewhere to hide," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not one of them." A face appeared in the doorway. Asian, maybe early 20s. She had Mr. Chen's eyes. "You're bleeding," she said. I looked down. My feet were cut up from running barefoot through the glass-strewn streets. I hadn't even felt it. "Yeah," I said. "Got any band-aids?" She almost smiled. "I'm Lisa. Mr. Chen was my father." Was. I noticed the past tense. "John," I replied. "I'm sorry about..." A scream from outside cut me off. We both ducked down behind the counter as someone ran past the broken window, followed by the wet sounds of shuffling feet and inhuman groaning. "We can't stay here," Lisa whispered. "They'll find us eventually. I have my father's car in the back alley. Keys, too." My head was pounding. The need for another hit was getting worse, making it hard to think. But she was right. We needed to move. "Where are we heading?" "My aunt's place in Queens. It's in one of those new high-rises with security gates. We might be safer there." She pulled out a set of keys. "Can you drive?" I hadn't driven in years, not since I lost my license, but I nodded anyway. "Yeah, I can drive." Lisa disappeared into the back room and returned with a backpack full of supplies and, thank whatever God was still listening, a first aid kit. As she bandaged my feet, I grabbed what I could from the shelves: water, energy drinks, some beef jerky. "Ready?" she asked, handing me a pair of her father's old sneakers. They were too small, but better than nothing. That's when we heard it. A wet, gurgling sound from the back room. The same room Lisa had just been in. The same room where I hadn't asked what had happened to Mr. Chen. "Dad?" Lisa's voice cracked. "Lisa, don't..." But she was already moving toward the storage room. I grabbed her arm, pulling her back just as Mr. Chen's body stumbled through the doorway. His throat was torn open, and his eyes were that same milky white as the businessman from earlier. Lisa screamed. The sound drew more attention from outside. We had seconds to decide: back door through Mr. Chen, or front door into whatever was drawn by Lisa's scream. I looked at Lisa. She was frozen, staring at what used to be her father. The decision was mine, and the wrong choice would get us both killed. The withdrawals would have to wait. First, we had to survive the next 5 minutes. I made my choice. Grabbing a mop from behind the counter, I snapped the handle against my knee. Not the best weapon, but better than nothing. "Back door," I whispered to Lisa. "On my count. 1, 2. I never got to 3. Mr. Chen lunged forward with surprising speed. I shoved Lisa aside and swung the mop handle, catching him in the face. It barely slowed him down. His hands clawed at my shirt, his bloody mouth snapping inches from my face. The smell, rot and something worse, made me gag. Lisa screamed again, but this time it was different. Angry. She grabbed a bottle from a shelf and smashed it against her father's head. Glass and cheap vodka went everywhere. Mr. Chen stumbled, giving me the opening I needed. I drove the jagged end of the mop handle through his eye socket. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Lisa threw up in the corner while I searched Mr. Chen's pockets for the back door key. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold it. The withdrawal symptoms were getting worse. Sweating, nausea, that crawling feeling under my skin. "I'm sorry," I told Lisa. "About your dad. But we gotta move." She wiped her mouth and nodded, her face hard. The car's a blue Honda Civic. The back door opened into an alley cluttered with dumpsters and dead bodies. The Honda was there, blocked in by a delivery truck. A woman in a FedEx uniform was slumped against the truck's wheel, her throat torn out. Her fingers twitched as we passed. "Don't look," I said, but Lisa was already staring. "I know her. Jenny. She delivered to my father's store every Tuesday." The Honda's engine seemed impossibly loud in the quiet alley. I pulled out as carefully as I could, scraping paint off both vehicles. The street beyond was chaos. Abandoned cars, broken glass, bloody handprints on walls, but surprisingly empty of the living dead. "They must be following the noise," Lisa said, pointing toward downtown where sirens and gunshots echoed. "The army's set up blockades on Canal Street." My stomach lurched. Not from withdrawal this time, but memory. "Sarah," I muttered. "Who?" "Nothing. Just someone I left behind." The shakes were getting worse. I could barely hold the steering wheel straight. "Listen, I need to tell you something. I'm a crack addict. Been using for years. I'm going into withdrawal and it's going to get bad, real bad." Lisa was quiet for a long moment. "There's a pharmacy 3 blocks from here. My friend Mike works there. Your friend might be dead." "Maybe. But you're no good to either of us if you're too sick to drive. We need supplies anyway." She pulled out her phone. "No signal. But Mike's always there on Thursdays. He practically lives in that place." I wanted to argue, but another wave of nausea hit me. She was right. I needed something to take the edge off, or I'd be worse than useless. "Okay, but we get in, we get out. No waiting around for your friend." We turned onto Mott Street. The pharmacy's sign was still lit, casting a fluorescent glow over the carnage outside. The front door was intact, locked. Lisa knocked. 3 quick taps, too slow. A shadow moved inside. A face appeared in the window. "Mike?" Lisa called softly. The door opened just enough for us to squeeze through. Mike was young, probably Lisa's age, with thick glasses and blood on his white pharmacist's coat. "Jesus, Lisa, I thought you were dead." "Not yet," she said. "We need supplies, and..." She glanced at me. "Methadone," I said, "or anything else that'll help with crack withdrawal." Mike's eyes narrowed. "Who is this guy?" Before Lisa could answer, a military helicopter roared overhead, so close it rattled the windows. We all ducked instinctively. "They're bombing downtown," Mike said, trying to contain it. "But it's not working. Nothing's working." The helicopter's spotlight swept past the pharmacy windows. In its beam, I saw dozens of shadows shambling toward the noise, toward us. We'd just walked into a trap. The helicopter's spotlight swept past again, and I counted at least 30 of them outside. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely help Mike and Lisa push a heavy metal shelf against the door. "Back room," Mike said, leading us past aisles of Band-Aids and baby formula. "There's a delivery entrance." The pounding started before we made it halfway. The front windows rattled with each impact. Mike fumbled with his keys, dropping them twice before getting the back room door open. "Hurry," Lisa whispered, but I was already doubled over, dry heaving. The withdrawal was hitting harder now. My skin felt like it was trying to crawl off my bones. Mike looked at me, then at Lisa. "He's using." "Was," I managed to say between heaves. "Need something, anything, The sound of breaking glass from the front of the store decided things. Mike ran to a locked cabinet, his keys jingling frantically. "This is all I can give you safely," he said, pulling out some pills. "It won't stop the withdrawal, but it'll take the edge off." I swallowed them dry as the first zombies stumbled into the store. Their shadows stretched across the floor toward us, twisted and wrong in the emergency lighting. The delivery entrance was blocked. Someone had backed a box truck against it, probably trying to secure the building earlier. We were trapped. "Up," Mike said, pointing to a hatch in the ceiling. "There's roof access through the storage attic. We use it for the HVAC maintenance." Lisa went first, then Mike. I could barely grip the ladder, but adrenaline and fear got me moving. The pills were starting to help, just enough to keep me functioning. The attic was hot and cramped, full of old cardboard boxes and dead pigeons. Below us, the sounds of the pharmacy being torn apart grew louder. "Now what?" Lisa asked. Mike crawled to a small window. "The Chinese restaurant next door has a lower roof. If we can make it across." "If?" I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "Man, I can barely stand." "You can," Lisa said firmly. "You got me out of my father's store. You're getting out of here too." The window was stuck. Mike and I pushed together, rust flaking off the old hinges. When it finally opened, the screech of metal seemed to echo across the whole city. The gap to the next roof was about 8 feet. 8 feet of empty space, with a 4-story drop to a street full of zombies. "I'll go first," Mike said. "Test if it'll hold weight." He took off his white coat, now more red than white. If I don't make it, Lisa, tell my sister." "Tell her yourself," Lisa snapped. "Go." Mike backed up as far as he could in the cramped space, took a breath, and ran. He made the jump barely, scrambling onto the restaurant's roof on his hands and knees. Lisa went next, more graceful than Mike, landing solidly. Then it was my turn. The pills had taken enough edge off that I could think, but my body still felt like it was being torn apart from the inside. Below, something large crashed in the pharmacy. "Come on, John," Lisa called softly. "You can do this." I backed up, my shoes scraping against the wooden attic floor. The distance seemed to grow with each second. 8 feet might as well have been 8 miles. The attic hatch burst open behind me. I didn't think, didn't look, just ran and jumped. I wasn't going to make it. Time slowed down mid-jump. I could see Lisa's outstretched hand, Mike's terrified face, and the long drop to the street below. My body wasn't going to make it, but my arms might. I slammed into the side of the building, my fingers catching the roof's edge. Pain shot through my shoulders as Lisa and Mike grabbed my arms, pulling me up. Behind us, pale faces appeared in the attic window. Pharmacy customers who'd come back for one final prescription. "Fire escape," Mike pointed. "We can make it to my car. It's in the alley." We scrambled down the metal stairs, rust flaking under our feet. The alley looked clear, but that didn't mean anything anymore. Mike's car was there, an old Subaru wagon covered in bumper stickers. "Keys?" Lisa asked. Mike's face went pale. "In my coat, the one I left up there." I laughed, actually laughed. Maybe it was the pills kicking in, or maybe I'd finally lost it. "I got this," I said, pulling a thin piece of metal from my sock. Some habits die hard. The car alarm blared as I broke in, echoing off the alley walls. I had the wires exposed when the first zombie appeared at the alley's entrance. Then another, and another. "Hurry," Lisa whispered, but I couldn't rush this. My hands were shaking too bad. Mike grabbed a trash can lid, holding it like a shield. "I'll buy you time," Mike, don't, Lisa started. The engine roared to life. Get in! We piled in as the dead filled the alley. I reversed hard, crushing several of them against the wall. The car fishtailed onto the street, and I fought for control. Where now? I asked. Queens, Lisa said, like we planned. Take the Manhattan Bridge. The bridge was chaos. Abandoned cars, military vehicles, bodies. But most of the dead were following the helicopter downtown. We weaved through the wreckage, the sun now high overhead. It had been 12 hours since I'd heard those first screams. Look, Mike pointed. The Manhattan skyline behind us was burning. Black smoke rose from downtown, and more helicopters circled like angry wasps. My father, Lisa said quietly. He always said this city would kill itself someday. The withdrawal was still there, clawing at me, but different now. For the first time in years, my head felt clear. Your aunt's place, I said. You sure it's safe? No, Lisa admitted. But nowhere is. At least there we have a chance. Mike was checking his phone. Still no signal. The whole grid might be down. I thought about Sarah, about Mr. Chen, about all the others who didn't make it these 12 hours. The craving hit me again, hard, but I pushed it down. We're alive, I said. That's what matters right now. We crossed into Queens as fighter jets screamed overhead. The city behind us was dying, but we weren't dead yet. And for the first time since this started, I wanted to stay that way. The pills would wear off soon. The withdrawal would get worse before it got better. But that was tomorrow's problem. Right now, we had to survive the next hour, then the next. 1 hour at a time, just like they taught in the rehab I never finished. Lisa put her hand on my shoulder. Thank you for helping me get out. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the road. The craving was still there, probably always would be. But for now, staying alive was the only high I needed. Your aunt's place, I said. How far? 10 minutes, Lisa answered, if the roads are clear. They wouldn't be. Nothing was clear anymore. But we'd made it 12 hours. We could make it 12 more. Behind us, Manhattan continued to burn. Ahead, the sun climbed higher, lighting up a world that had changed forever. The withdrawal shakes were coming back, but my grip on the steering wheel was steady. For the first time in years, I knew exactly who I was and what I needed to do. Keep these people alive, keep myself alive, and face whatever came next with clear eyes and a clear head. The apocalypse, it turned out, was one hell of a wake-up call.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that story as much as I did. Come back next time for some more scary stories. And as always, remember to face your fears.